So you're thinking about buying an X-T3. Well, in today's video, I'm going to go over what it's like to use this camera 3+ years now with the Fujifilm X-T3. I'm not going to go over too much of the technical aspects. You can basically read those on any website. I'm going to go over what it's like as a human being, possibly, to use this camera for 3+ years and hopefully help you make a decision on whether you are going to buy one or not. Now, I don't have my X-T3 in my hands because, well, I am filming on it, but you can imagine that I have it here. This is my X-T3. There are many like it, but this is mine. And a quick note before we get started, this whole YouTube channel exists so we can provide free art for people and the ability to make art to people for free, including you. So by hitting that subscribe button, it really does help you out. Also, the faster this channel grows, the larger this channel grows, the more we can provide for everybody, including yourself. So do yourself a favor and hit that sub button. And without further ado, let's get into it. So I bought my X-T3 in 2019, pretty close to its release date. And my first experience with the X-T3 was out-of-box failure. I took it out of the box, I inserted my card, I took it for a walk, shot a few photos, camera freezing. I took it back to the camera store where I purchased it, of course with my receipt and warranty, but because it had passed 48 hours by the time I took it back, they refused to out-of-box failure the product and replace it, and instead I had to send it away for repair. So my first experience with the X-T3 was that it was in a repair store for 10 days. I did a lot of reading online at the time to rectify the problem. There was a lot of conversation going on, and unfortunately none of it from Fujifilm acknowledging that there is a problem with the X-T3. A lot of people were experiencing this. There were some firmware updates at the time promising to fix the issue. However, my camera did have to go away for repair and came back with an entirely replaced motherboard, amongst another few small things. I suspect at the time they actually did know what the problem was in this initial release of the Fujifilm X-T3 and just went straight ahead and fixed it. I was also then recommended to pick up the fastest SD card that I could find, and well, although that's a good thing to purchase, it did add another $120 on top of the cost of the camera and lens that I originally purchased. Now, this all did seem to fix the issue up until recently, when I shot my last video actually, photographing 23 strangers for free, which you should totally check out. There was a freezing issue again, and hopefully that does not persist, but it was the first time I was shooting on the X-T3 with studio lighting and a wireless transmitter. I hadn't experienced it in the entire time since the original purchase and the repair, but yeah, just frustrating it again. There's obviously a fault in this camera, and seemingly it wasn't entirely repaired. So first impressions with Fujifilm X-T3, not so positive. However, I do suspect that I have one of the earliest releases of the camera, and hopefully since then, these issues have been fixed. Now, as far as the general ergonomics and usability of the camera, I could not be more of a fan. This camera is light, you have all the dials across the top making everything really accessible. The menus make all of the buttons, which there is a lot of them having double functions and everything like that. The menus make everything highly customizable, which I've done to my taste and how I shoot with my camera. So yeah, I really couldn't say any bad things about the general ergonomics and menu system of the Fujifilm X-T3. I carry mine all the time just in my hand with a wrist strap. I'm not a huge fan of the neck strap. I shoot a lot of street photography, so it just makes things very accessible to me, and I've had no problem at all with the weight or just the comfortability of holding the camera. Maybe if you have a bit bigger hands than I do, you could opt for the battery grip, which just give you a bit extra space on holding onto the camera. Otherwise, yeah, love it, absolutely love it. On the contrary, I could not be less happy with the battery life. It is one of the worst that I have ever used. I have 2 batteries, which is totally not enough. And I have gotten around this by basically juggling them through the charger as I've been working. However, like I say, I shoot a lot of street photography and it's super, really not ideal. They last about 1 to 2 hours in the summer. I have done everything before you say to minimize the battery usage on this camera, turn down the brightness of LCD screens, turned off the shot previews and everything like that, and it's still, really bad. I don't want to have to carry 4, 5, 6 batteries. I also don't want to have to buy 4, 5, 6 batteries, because even at like $50 a pop, that's just adding so much cost to the total expense of purchasing this camera. And this might be a little bit specific to myself, but I live in a country that gets very cold winters. So being out there in the winter, wanting to shoot street photography in the snow, for example, that battery life is chopped from 1 to 2 hours, from 30 minutes to an hour. It's really not ideal. Next up, I want to talk about the electronic viewfinder, which again, to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of. In the past, I've used film cameras and also digital cameras, which have the viewfinder, which is native or analog, I don't know what you call it, but the ones that go through the lens, and they still have some sort of heads-up display. You have a light meter and a focusing meter. And for myself, I just feel that's about all I've ever really needed. However, I do have the histogram turned on my X-T3's viewfinder, which is just another little added nice. But otherwise, yeah, don't really feel like I need it. And let me tell you why I'm not a big fan. And there are a few major reasons as to why I'm not a big fan. One of them which circles right back down to battery life. We don't have a lot of it, and the LED screen inside the viewfinder is draining the battery life. I do appreciate that there are many options on how the back screen and the viewfinder operate. Like, for example, you can change it to back screen only, viewfinder only, a combination of the both, or even that there is a sensor in the viewfinder, so as you bring it up to your eye, the viewfinder will turn on, and as you take it away, it will switch off. However, I do suspect that just drains more battery life. And maybe there is a good reason for this, but there isn't a way to just switch it off, which, to be honest, I would have it off most of the time. Secondly, again, if you shoot in the cold, it's slow. It's just slow to load. Every time, you half press your shutter to turn it on or you bring it up to your eye, it has a lag. It's not a lot, but it's around about, I don't know, half a second to a second. And if you're out shooting street or you're shooting sports or anything like that, where you're gonna get a bit cold or you're out in the weather, you might miss your moment. Additionally, and this again might be very specific to someone like myself who lives in a cold country and likes to shoot in bad weather, but snow will get packed into the viewfinder and trigger the LED screen again and, drain the battery life. And it's very hard to get out without feeling like you're just smushing snow and wetness into the electronics of the camera. On a positive side, there are film simulations within the camera which you can actually set to the viewfinder, so you can get a preview of what the film simulation is going to look like within your camera. One of my favorite things to do is just switch it to black and white. Often I shoot in black and white and edit it in black and white, so I can actually use the viewfinder to see in black and white, which is pretty nice. And another great thing being that there can be some exposure assistance within the LED screen, which can really help you focus in low light situations. And well, I've touched on this a little bit, but I will say that overall, this camera is amazing in all weather conditions. I've taken it out in some pretty horrific ones, including some non-weather sealed lenses, which I don't recommend because I don't want to be the cause of you ruining hundreds of dollars worth of lenses. However, one of them I just put to the test out there in some pretty horrible weather many times, and it's still running totally fine. So yeah, couldn't be happier with the weather sealing on this camera. I have heard that if you really want to soak this thing, there's a couple of places that you could go and tape up before you do that. However, otherwise, again, nothing bad to say about that. Now, as far as the files are concerned, I only ever work in RAW, so I can't speak to the JPEG. And when I first brought this camera, there were some issues, actually some pretty major issues that a lot of people were unhappy about. However, it seems like some firmware updates from Fujifilm and possibly some fixes from applications like Lightroom and Capture One have fixed most of it. And I say most of it because I still feel like there's something a little bit weird, and maybe it's pixel peeping, but as I zoom in, there tends to be this, I can only describe it as what looks like carpet. Like the image is kind of furry, and it's just something I'm not a fan of. Now, if you're looking at a tiny image on Instagram on your phone, you're probably never going to notice it. But if you're a professional and you want to use this camera, or even a semi-professional, I feel like you are going to notice it, especially if you've had experience with another camera in the past that you've been very happy with, that maybe is outdated now, so you want to upgrade. I don't know. It's for me, I notice it, and still not something that I would say I'm entirely happy with. Now, as far as lenses go, it seems like there's quite a good range of lenses from Fujifilm on these X series cameras, and of course more to be released. I only own 2 of these lenses, and if you're curious, it's the 35mm f2, which I really like, and there is also the 18-55, 2.8-4, which I'm currently shooting on. If you want a budget lens that will just cover a wide range of things, this is one of the best purchases I've ever made as far as budget lenses go. So yeah, check that one out. Now, one thing I'm not a huge fan of, and that's with all the lenses that I've used so far, they are focused by wire. And I don't know a lot about this, but I think that's a really good thing for filmmakers who want to use manual focus. However, for a street photographer like myself, who might want to use things like zone focusing, yeah, I don't love it. There's no mechanical coupling, and basically what that means, if you're unsure, is that, you know, if you focus all the way to the left, you hit a stopping point, and if you focus all the way to the right, you hit a stopping point. That doesn't exist in these lenses, it just keeps turning. So, you know, there is a digital meter within the viewfinder or on the back of the screen to tell you at what distance you're focused to. However, if you've used, for example, any film lenses, you'll know that you can just get familiar with your lens and use the markers to zone focus, for example. And then if you don't touch it at all, then it doesn't change. With these lenses, if you happen to knock it or change anything on your camera or hit an autofocus button, for example, you will then have to go and reset it, which means bringing the camera up to your eye and using the digital meter rather than just, you know, being able to redo it manually. Two quick extra things here. With all the lenses that I have used, there was no aperture marking, which I find just a little bit strange. It feels like such a small detail to just be able to put on there and then you have it in front of you. And also that the lenses are pretty ugly. The ones that I've seen and the one, at least the 35 that I own, is just horrendous looking. I know that sounds maybe stupid to some of you, but you know, the camera itself is so beautiful and you kind of just, you know, you spend the money, you want a pretty looking camera. So my final thoughts to you are this: if you have something such as an X-T1 or something older or something from another brand, which, you know, you feel like needs upgrading and the X-T3 is in your budget and you're, you know, anywhere from amateur to semi-pro, I think the X-T3 is a pretty good choice. It's really versatile in the ways that, you know, it's pretty decent for video and it's really decent for photos. It did win a lot of awards. I think it won Camera of the Year. So clearly there was a lot of people who liked this camera. I don't have all positive things to say about it. However, I was fortunate with my last camera, which is now very out of date, but I was very, very, very happy with that camera. So I think it's just easy for me to like nitpick a few things on this camera. And I think specifically because I do things like street photography, which maybe not all of you do, I just, you know, I find a few faults in it. No camera is perfect, maybe. This one might just not be the perfect one for me. However, if you are a professional and you do have the budget, maybe you're looking for something full frame, obviously the X-T3 is not the right choice for you. I will say it would be amazing as a backup camera. Let's say you're a wedding photographer and you want to be safe on the day. Let's say your whatever dies on the spot. You have an X-T3 in the bag and you can continue shooting and get amazing shots for a pretty good budget. And that about brings us to a close today. Hopefully I was able to help you on whether or not to buy the Fujifilm X-T3 from someone who is not sponsored by Fujifilm and just wanted to give you an honest review of what it's been like to use this camera over the past few years. Now go ahead and hit that subscribe button if it helped you out. There are plenty more things like this and far more interesting things to come, so do yourself a favor. And until next time, happy creating. Peace.